All right, now I think we've got people. So it is 1 o'clock Eastern on the hour here, just a minute after. So welcome to our first webinar back in this September, the sort of the quote unquote school year. We will be doing these regularly as we did last year. And the first topic that we want to talk to you about today is about designing and building AI products and services. And so before we get started, we always do recognize the lands we operate on. So we acknowledge that Queen's University is situated on traditional Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee territory. We are grateful to live, learn, and play on these lands. So this webinar is hosted by myself. So I'm Dr. Catherine Broman. I'm the academic director of the Master of Digital Product Management program. And so if you are coming in through sort of any of our marketing, we've actually posted this to multiple program interests. And so Dr. Christian Muse, who's my counterpart here, and you'll hear him come off in a second, he's the academic co-director for the School of Computing. We are really representing what's called the Master of Digital Product Management, which is one of our programs here. But the topic today is actually related to our Master of Management in Artificial Intelligence. We have a Master's of Management in Analytics. We have a whole suite of Masters of Innovation Entrepreneurship. So there's a whole suite of programs that we offer here at Smith. And this topic really does sit at the intersection of that. And so Christian and I really are going to have a discussion about really how AI is influencing products and services specifically around their design. So I will introduce myself quickly. Christian, we didn't practice this, but I assume you will do the same once I'm finished. So my background is before I did an academic career, I did a tech startup in my young life, spent some time in Silicon Valley, and really understood what early stage product looked like. Then I went into academia and I studied project management, IT project management for about 2 decades. And then we really sort of came to terms in the business school anyway, around really how IT project was very different than digital product. And on the sort of the heels of that research, we have an international research group. I took the liberty of saying we should really offer a program around digital product management and its practices. I do, although, teach in the other sister programs, and so I can speak to the relevance of this webinar to those programs. For the Master of Digital Product Management, one of our insights is there's no way we could come to market with an offering without the School of Computing. And specifically, if you come to any of our earlier webinars, we used to have Dr. Nicholas Graham. He was my counterpart, the co-creator, if you will, of the Master of Digital Product Management. And then on the heels of recognizing this was about to fundamentally change, we really needed to bring in an expert in artificial intelligence. And so I'm going to turn it over right now to Christian to give you a little bit idea of who he is and what his background is.
Thank you, Catherine, and welcome everybody. So I did do my PhD in artificial intelligence and then did a couple of postdocs in a similar field at the University of Melbourne and MIT before turning to industry for a few years. In industry, I had the privilege to lead a team in IBM research where we were applying the latest AI techniques to create dialogue agents for business-to-business applications. And that's kind of where I got my footing in that sort of area. Since then, I did move to Queen's University, and I've been a professor here ever since for the last half decade or so. And with the Masters of Digital Product Management, I guess my entry into it was Nick and Catherine reaching out and having me teach more and more of the workshops in artificial intelligence. And again, recognition of the growing desire and need to have AI fundamentals become a part of this is sort of how I came about in this role. I'm very excited to be here and for the discussion today. Thanks, Catherine.
No problem. All right. Thanks, Christian. So just a few just administrative things, or there is a Q&A. So if you're on your Zoom screen, you should have a Q&A button. The nice thing about 2 of us delivering this is one of us is usually talking and the other one is listening, which means that listening person can address questions in the chat. So please do put your Q&A, your questions into that feature. And we'll either park them, which means we'll visit them at the end, or we'll address them in flight. So we love this to be as interactive as possible. So please, if you have any questions along the way, let us know. So the topic of what we really want to talk about today is around the idea of how designing and developing these AI-enabled digital products and services evolving. And certainly this is a conversation. I think Christian and I, getting ready for today, we were like, we should probably do a series. And certainly some of the the feedback we got on LinkedIn when we posted this were other people in the field that were either related to Christian's professional network or mine that are saying, hey, this is a conversation we really need to start to have between academia and practice, because this is evolving. So what we want to talk about first is, what is an AI product or service? Really, how does it differ from other products and services? The second topic we want to talk about is, what is unique about the design of these products and services? And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about, this is a real conversation between Christian and I about what is the end-to-end journey for building these AI products and services that succeed. Now, this being said, I really do think that with your help, we can also identify a number of other things we need to talk about, which is what Christian and I were thinking. Maybe this becomes a series, right? Where we come back next month or the month after to be able to say, hey, let's continue the conversation, because this is really all just getting started. We'll end the session with some Q&A, and then we have a short wrap up. And so this is an hour, and we will get you on your way about 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And so if you have to leave ahead of that, no problem, just drop off and you will get a copy of this recording as well. All right. So let's start by talking specifically through the eras. And there's some people on this call, maybe like me, who have lived through these eras. There's other people that may be new to this. So the eras are kind of it's always great to start with a little bit of history. And so if we take a look at where we came from and how digital product management emerged, it really did emerge from a proper IT discipline. So back in what we call the foundational IT era, in the 60s to the 90s, technology was really a support function, really looking at back-end automation, task efficiency, where really the purpose or the mindset of using technology was all around efficiency and automation, okay? Then we moved into, with the commercialization of the internet, and we understood this whole idea around what the web could do. What we have are really an understanding of really what we call like digitization and what our online presence. And at the end of the day, from a business perspective anyway, the marketing function really took hold of technology at this point. Really understanding how you could get your company, present on the web, and how we can share information and start to work into like electronic commerce, and all those kind of capabilities emerged in the web era. And then going to the 2000s and the 2020s, so the last decade, if you will, we really moved into, for the first time, seeing the role of technology as a real strategic function with regard to platforms, ecosystems, mobility, and experience-driven capabilities. So now, not only are we supporting and enabling the marketing function, but we're actually shaping customer experiences and ecosystem capability. So we're starting to see blurring happen between organizational boundaries, where you start to see APIs connecting things to other things. And it was this sort of era where the concept of digital products emerged, and the ability to be able to build those products, and Christian's going to talk a little bit about that, with existing infrastructure, meaning that you could have kind of a foundational capability, maybe an ERP system, and we can start to spin off these lightweight capabilities. So many people like to call this kind of the app era, is another good way to think about the 2010s to the 2020s. And now we're moving into what's called the AI product era. And admittedly, this is to a question mark, right? So the fast-paced moving of these things, who knows, a couple years where we'll be, but right now we are definitely planted in this AI product era. And what's different about this is it goes beyond strategy to truly innovative capabilities of technology, meaning that we can use agentic-based technologies, intelligence, products that learn, adapt, and act, where we start to see technology being, working with humans to really kind of fundamentally change the way we do things. And even Christian and I, as professors, we're seeing fundamental changes in what we do with regard to how students learn, how we need to deliver our courses. I don't think there's any industry that exists that doesn't ask the question about how autonomy, intelligence, and personalization is going to fundamentally change what we do and how we work. So because of that sort of eras, we've also come up with these different types of digital products, right? So if you think early stage around software as a service, we've got a number of different software applications. Those are definitely products, but I would argue that they were early stage products. They're not lightweight, they're heavyweight. Then we move into platforms, right? So you get this whole idea of, the emergence of Facebook and Airbnb, all the platforms that we know. We went through sort of the platform type of technologies. And then content-based products. So we have the example of Netflix here, where really at the end of the day, the value sits in the content. It's just a way for us to provision that content in different ways. Same thing with data. So we had this huge influx of now data products, data as a service, understanding how data moves around and how we can monetize data to create new different products and services that inform us or wake us up in the morning, plan our agenda, whatever those things may be. And the two we really want, well, the one we want to focus on is AI-enabled products, but I do find quite a synergy between IoT-enabled products. So this is where we really start to see the development of these Internet of Things. So these tangible things like our Next systems that sense things in our home and be able to connect data through sensors into sort of a data environment and enable that. So that was kind of the beginning of sensing all of these things to then now where we are in AI-enabled products, which means all that data feeds into these large language models, and all of a sudden now we're into more of an intelligence-based, capability, if you will, in this era. So there's many products, and just because we're entering into the AI-enabled product era, it doesn't mean that these other products go away. In essence, the conversation I want to have with Christian really talks about how these other types of products are actually changing or evolving with the AI capabilities. Okay. So with that in mind, what I want to do now is really turn it over to Christian, and he's going to give us some real examples of how these AI-enabled products and services there's different types of them. So let me turn it over to him, and
actually, thank you, Catherine. But if you
Yeah.
could linger on this slide just for 1 second, and we didn't mention this beforehand, but just as of today, there is new news dropping into my feeds about how some of these things really are being reshaped in the presence of AI. Netflix, for example, I think they're starting to run the analytics to the point of what sort of narrative aspects of the shows and movies that they create based on the viewer patterns. When did they stop watching? When did they go to something else? And so on, drives back to the creative role to say, let's create more movies of this type with these very fine-tuned dials tweaked in just the right way to sort of match the clientele that Netflix has. So they are using data analytics and AI at a very advanced form that we're sort of seeing in the modern era moving forward. And the IoT-enabled products, I think we are just on the cusp of another revolution, and how all of those different systems and services can kind of work together. LLMs and generative AI has sort of come around full circle to now agentic AI, and creating these many moving part systems where you have an intelligent agent that's able to orchestrate all of the services that are available to you. And so the IoT aspect of that is definitely just ripe for an intersection with this. And I'm pretty sure we're going to see an explosion of very cool things in the near future. Right down to the Google Home suite of things is no longer going to use their traditional dialogue flow stuff. They're replacing it with Gemini or similar LLM-driven agentic systems on all of the home devices, IoT devices. So all of this is just sort of being reshaped with the modern era of AI. So yeah, thanks. And if we'll go to the next one, I just wanted to break down, kind of what I see as AI in digital products and how it can take on many different forms to kind of tease apart what they look like in different ways. The first notion is product is an AI capability. And so OpenAI's ChatGPT or the LangChain suite of tools or Gemini itself as a product Here, the product itself is the AI capability. And it's either a business to business product where that capability is sold for a per token basis, or it is a higher level sophisticated AI agent or interface for you to create the things that you would like. So this is one notion of what a digital product could be. Perhaps the most often seen example would be the next slide, AI as a capability inside of a product that exists. And so this is, if anybody uses Spotify, might recognize the logo. This is DJ, your personal DJ that will recommend songs based on your likes and dislikes. And if you tell it next song, it'll remember you didn't like the one previously. And so what we see often is products will have an AI capability brought in to be part of how it functions, where perhaps an AI capability did not exist prior to that point. It's sort of being introduced as one feature among many inside of the digital products. And on the next one, it deserves, treatment in its own right. Support for any particular product, digital or otherwise, being done by an AI product or an AI capability. So Eno is the Capital One chatbot. Every major bank has their own sort of dialogue agent that you can communicate with, and they're sort of building out to handle, the heavy load of customer service. And so then the long tail could be given to the human operators as a fallback. So we see this as a very, very common way that AI is entering the product space. And then finally, sort of hidden to most of the users of any individual product is all of the AI capability behind the scenes, improving the internal process of any sort of business. So this example, I believe, comes from the Microsoft orchestration suite of tools where it's helping to automate the business process, the day-to-day running of an organization. And so there's a lot of AI capability now being applied internally at companies to try and smooth over some of the rough patches and how things happen from a business process perspective. So these are just four of the major camps that we are seeing now with AI sort of changing how things are done in the product space.
And thanks, Christian. It's helpful, I think, to think about these in categories, primarily
Mhm.
because, AI can be kind of the product itself, or it can attach itself to some of the things we already know are going on. And the last example is really interesting because I find more and more, just an interview last week with a candidate for the program was talking about the fact that they've invested at their organization, millions in this Salesforce capability.
Mhm.
And now they're really trying to get people in the organization to leverage that capability and build out new capabilities. And I think
Now
that's
that you
really
have the
what you're
potential.
talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yep.
So it's just and this product, which we're going to talk about next, is really just understanding exactly how we're seeing these capabilities kind of change because of the movement into the AI era.
Mhm.
Quickly before we go on to the next, one question. So people in the audience are coming from a variety of different backgrounds. So whether it be IT or maybe even existing product people that have worked in this space for a long, or maybe 5 years, 10 years, or even longer. If there was one thing that you would suggest that they could do, right, to really prepare themselves for this shift in era, what
Mm.
would it be?
Yeah, I think the advice I would give is the same advice regardless of profession. Have the suite of tests and things that you do in your day to day that you know is difficult and sort of at the extreme of your capability, and then continuously measure what is the capability of what exists out there to accomplish those tasks, right? And so for me as a professor, if my task is to read papers and come up with certain criticisms or look for key things inside of that research paper, how do all of the best offerings from the major players do at that task? And the answer is not great, and in many ways, really not great. And in some ways, it's okay. But having the suite of tests of what you do as a product manager or as a professor or as a C-suite executive, whatever it is that you do on the day to day, have that kind of mini test of things that you would take to any new release of GPT, for example, or the latest version of Gemini and so on. Having this just sort of regular cadence of how good is the system at the key tasks at the moment that you're looking at, and see how that changes over time. And what you'll notice is for certain key things, there will be an inflection point where it starts to be an aha moment. And like now it is getting to a level of capability that it changes the game in a key way. And so having it doesn't need to be extensive, just the set of 10 things that you like to ask and see what it can do. It could be something as silly as what is it? There's one prominent researcher that always asks for a pelican riding a bicycle, right? Draw me a pelican riding a bicycle in an SVG, a very particular format. And most of the time it's pretty garbage, when it creates it, but you can see the progression of these systems over time get closer and closer, and just as one silly test that you can keep giving this as sort of a way to measure. I think it gives you a notion of up-to-date information about the status of things and how they currently exist, as well as the exercising that mental muscle of being able to play with these systems and kind of know what they're about and what they're capable of. I think those are essential. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I'd add to that is one thing. It's not really an additional point, Christian, as much as it's just a synthesized point.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest things I think to me is just curiosity.
Yeah.
Like, I saw those things come across even in just my social feeds around like AI for people over 50. And I'm like, oh, I have an hour to kind of take that on and how I can.
Yeah.
But I think we have to get curious. But I think what you're highlighting is we also have to be critical,
Mm-hmm.
right? So these aren't magic tools. They are, they are early in its development and understanding how they're beneficial and where they maybe, create some risks. But I think
Mm-hmm.
it's that whole tension between, yes, be critical in terms of the fact that they are probably a bit immature, or not a bit, maybe more than that, but also curious in the fact that they're not going away, right? It's
Yeah.
not going to be like in the 60s where we saw them emerge and then they didn't go anywhere. Like, I think we are on the cusp of these fundamentally changing the way that we work and live. So
Absolutely.
just
Yeah.
the people in the chat keep giving me those. I'm watching them. I mean, Christian's the one we're kind of probing into him today, so I can keep going on those. So keep adding them. I'm not ignoring you. I'm just going to get Christian now onto the next topic. So one of the things we want to talk about in this webinar is the unique qualities of AI products, right? So really, how are these products different? So I created 5 of these, Christian, and what I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to do is just give you my take on it and then turn it over to you to get your take. So the one observation I have is that what's unique in AI products is it's really highlighting the focus on data. So my research is in AI-enabled healthcare transformation, and just tomorrow, I'm off to a retreat to talk to paramedics about the importance of clean and well-governed data, because really they're paramedics. They're out to save lives. They're not data people. But I think this is one of the whole things around these products is that we truly, whether you need to be users of these products or developers of these products, really understand that there's a higher focus on data, how we clean it, how we label it, and how we govern it. So thoughts on that from your perspective?
Yeah. The focus on data cannot be an afterthought, right? For a large part of the different set of AI capabilities you might bring to bear, you need to think in advance, what is the data we could possibly connect, and how is the data that we're going to collect put in a way that could be useful for us down the line? And it's very difficult because you don't exactly know what you're going to build as a capability on top of the data that you have. But almost guaranteed, if you don't put the effort in advance, you will have regrets down the line that you did not collect more. You did not sort of align one data source with another in such a way that allows you to extract higher level insight. And the one thing that I would sort of double down with this is at times the focus on the data, even if you're in an application regime where you're using generative AI and you're not necessarily collecting the data, there is still a tremendous amount of data that comes into play here. And I know we'll touch on it again with the ethical considerations, but all of the data used to pre-train these large language models, that data existed, and knowing roughly what was inside of there and how that influences the technology that you're going to use when you integrate an LLM into any sort of product, that's an important part of the conversation as well. Um, so focus on the data is absolutely key, and we find time and time again the real gold mine is the data that you have, and that is what the companies sort of lock into, and that's their real capital is the data that they're able to use and analyze. And the better you can do that, the better position you're in, for sure.
Yeah. And building an AI-enabled product on
Yeah.
garbage data is just going to be not good, right?
Yeah. Foundation is sand. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next one is, I called it no more if X then Y. And the reason why is because AI outputs are what's called probabilistic. And so we need to understand that the fact that the old way of thinking, and in the program, we do a lot of work around computational thinking. And, early stage computational thinking was very linear, right? In terms of the fact that you could say, well, if this is the case, then this will be the output. But in AI-enabled products, this is no longer the case, right? It can be like if X, then Y times 1,000. There's so many different possibilities. And so what we need to do is embed concepts like trust. So the degree to which, these products can be trusted, the degree to which they define for us as users how the AI enablement's working in terms of its explainability, and even understanding the concept of fallback mechanisms, right, embedded inside these different products. So can you speak a little bit to this point, Christian, about this whole idea of the change in really what I would call the core kind of guts or
Yeah. Yeah.
DNA of these products?
Yeah, and this is largely with respect to a specific type of AI, the generative AI models that we're seeing, right? There is still tremendous potential to use certain AI techniques that will synthesize these if X then Y type of policies that could be scrutinized and deployed reliably. But we're finding the modern potential to have generative AI brought to the fore is really game changing if applied right. But it does come with a certain set of different ways of thinking in these modalities, right? It is very probabilistic in nature, and it is fundamentally a technology that will produce things that look plausible. And quite often, that could be useful, and other times that could be harmful. And so it comes down to the design of products around this and knowing when it's appropriate to incorporate something generative in that sense. We have a number of examples that we go through throughout the program, but to surface just one of them, um, it would be to say if you're going to use a chatbot to surface information, instead of feeding all of the documentation for a product you might want to have your chatbot answer questions over, instead of it just generating the answer from that token for token, which could lead to it hallucinating things that just don't exist, especially if they ask a question that's not in the data that you fed it. You instead, behind the scenes, use generative AI to say, where in our documentation is the user's query most related to? And you have the fallback there for the AI to say, well, it's not in here at all. And if it does find a location, it'll say, I think it's this location. And then what the user sees is a snippet from the documentation that is written by a human, but was found using generative AI through thousands of pages of documentation, for example. And so with this very minor switch in how you do things, the worst case scenario is that you surface something irrelevant or the agent says, I don't know, right? And the best case scenario is it does find that needle in a haystack compared to just feeding everything into ChatGPT and say, give me the answers. Your worst case scenario here is that it's hallucinating policy that doesn't exist. And now you're subject to all of the fallout that comes from deploying something like that. And so really the design of the product itself, we have a different set of design patterns now for generative AI, taking this sort of probabilistic nature into account.
Interesting. Excellent. So the next one is around what I call the human in the loop. And so one thing that if anybody in the session came from kind of early stage design thinking, any of those type of courses, we focus a lot on the human, right? And certainly human computer interaction and how a human behaves, even in the old design sort of methodologies back in the Steve Jobs days of really making interfaces that are usable. But what's cool about AI enabled products is this idea that the technology is now an agent, meaning that it is a learning and evolving thing. So you've got this whole idea that there's, in a lot of ways, these autonomous processes, if you will. Now you see the human in the loop, meaning that humans kind of need to understand how these automated, sort of processes are working that are being really led and owned by these agentic capabilities. And so can you speak a little bit about this as to how that really changes the qualities of these products, Christian? Like, are
Yeah.
they truly going to take my job? You know, like, I mean, what is the sort of the high level thoughts around this?
Yeah, it will absolutely morph your job, but I think certainly not take it. I would venture to say it should be humans in the loop rather than a single human. But the design of these things, if you're going to automate a process within an organization, for example, you look at the map of the process and how it currently operates with the humans at the central point of those and the systems that those humans use as part of that process. And the opportunity to automate any specific part of that, the very first part of that conversation is if you were to sort of have an automation of a key subcomponent, what are the touch points for all of the humans around that subcomponent in your process? And how the humans interact and sort of intersect with the automation is the driving force behind this. If you don't have a human-centered view of how to introduce automation, it's bound for failure. And we will get to the discussion of how often these things can fail if done in inappropriately or incorrectly. But the human in the loop is part of the conversation for it. And it also, I think, touches on the shared ownership. A couple points down is the co-creation of these systems with the humans that interact with the systems we're finding is central to the effective creation and deployment of any AI-enabled product. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, and I think this leads to the next point too, which is a nice build on to that. The whole idea of the bias that is embedded right into these and the importance of responsible AI principles.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, so often with these models now, you don't get to control from the bottom up all of the data that was used to train these models. You'll take a foundational model that's been pre-trained by these large companies that have the resources to create them, and then you'll fine-tune for your own business applications. But what's inside of that pre-training comes with a fair bit of bias. And again, just like the if X then Y is kind of changed now to this probabilistic nature, you need to understand the bias that's inside of here to understand when it should not be deployed or how it should be deployed responsibly. And the safeguards ultimately that you want to put around it. So again, you're not liable for some of the things that could go wrong with this.
That's interesting. So you're kind of drawing attention to the kind of, similarities between point two and point
Yeah,
four as well,
yeah,
right? Is that whole
yep.
fallback mechanism. I mean, how can we possibly control a lot of these things as product people? You're sort of at the liberty of what the agent's going to do on its own, but then having these risk mitigation or fallback mechanisms as a way to really mitigate some of those outcomes. Interesting.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And kind of an interesting way, if just left to their own devices, we find that there's a number of scenarios where the outputs of generative AI might be biased in what it produces. But if you flip that on its head and you have generative AI sit as part of a product that analyzes the bias of human output, we're now in a much better setting where if it misses the mark and it says you're kind of biased in the outputs that you make here, or you sort of miss this particular angle on what it is that you produced, you being the human, that could be wrong 9 times out of 10, and you could ignore the advice. But the 1 time out of 10, it catches something. It catches perhaps an ethical violation in the business process and inside of an organization, or it catches a misdiagnosis from a clinician, or if it catches something that's that rare case, 1 in a 10, 1 in 100, that 1 in 100 can still be extremely useful. And so again, this just comes down to deploying it in the correct way so that the harms are it perhaps misses something that you would have missed already. And the potential benefit is it catches something really good and powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So this last point is going to address a number of the questions we've been getting in the chat here. And it really does come down to, I called it shared ownership because, and this is something I think where we can really talk a little bit more about the programs we offer here at Smith. But I'm going to talk and then Christian can respectfully agree or disagree. Because I think we see this, specific question from very different perspectives, me being in the business school and him being in the School of Computing. So in this whole point is about the fact that there are multiple owners of these AI enabled products. So in the old days around, products that weren't AI driven, you might have some data capabilities or whatever, a tech team that's working on something. Even you could have even had a little predictive model in there or some kind of, capability around automating something. But this truly comes down to product and AI are fundamentally different skill sets. When you're building a product, you are truly trying to understand the need for that product, the marketing behind that product, the strategy behind the product, like how it's going to deliver value to the organization. When you are on an artificial intelligence team, that really does get into the building of the model that is going to be the intelligent thing. So from our perspective, these two things are fundamentally different, even back down to the base knowledge. Like in product, it's all about life cycle management, building off of project capabilities. In AI, it's building off of analytical capabilities, more math, right, Christian? I mean, to really build these models. So what we see in these AI products is a true collaboration between AI teams, whether they be a data science team or however your organization wants to call it, and a product team. And so the challenge be, if you're going to be an AI product manager, the question is, which way do you lean, right? Do you have AI capabilities of then you're building out product capabilities? Are you a product person that's trying to learn AI? But these two things, I think, fundamentally are really hard to weave together and certainly impossible to teach in one program, right? We could never teach you how to be an AI-enabled data scientist that can build these things and how to run the life cycle.
At the same
they are
time.
different. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I guess the ideal thing that somebody leaves the program with is the ability to facilitate a conversation of an interdisciplinary team that has both of these elements, right? It is a tremendous amount of expertise on either side of the fence, but being able to recognize on the product side when you might be going towards something that is a failure mode on the AI side, knowing enough and knowing the right language and the words and the vocabulary to start that conversation and help facilitate it. I think that's the ultimate place you need to be. Because there is, like you said, a tremendous amount of expertise on either side, and you need to facilitate that conversation, that communication between the two in order to figure out how to deploy appropriately. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so funny, like even Christian and I would say, well, the person that facilitates the conversation, Christian, is the product person, because we're the ones, and Christian is like, well, in a lot of ways, you would think that the AI person needs, the whole point is that the conversation has to be facilitated, and likely it's from two fundamentally different perspectives. So like the ideal situation for us, would be that we've got somebody that's kind of got an AI capability that comes into the program and wants to learn more about product. And then in our AI program, if somebody has kind of the project product capabilities, but they want to go learn how to build out AI capabilities and AI models, then they would go to our MMAI program. But this is why it's really important, anybody on the call, that you inquire with our recruitment advisors and really understand how these programs, are different, but yet how they play together. So we had one question that I've already answered about the idea, do we ever do like a capstone, an MDPM with an MMAI? And we're like, yes. I mean, this is how we start to see these things really working together. But we do want to end the webinar because, I mean, it's kind of like, to say, well, you'd have to take both programs. Not at all. Like our whole thing is, okay, if this is true, if shared ownership is true, then what are we doing in MDPM to make sure that you get enough AI in MDPM in order for us to enter into this era? And that's really what we're talking about in this last session. Which really comes down to one question I want to get sort of on the table first is, why it's so important to talk about this is an old slide. So this is like a slide I used to use 4 years ago when I'd say, only 78% of products are even driving out value propositions, right? So we're investing in these new products, new apps, new capabilities, and people don't use them, or the company doesn't get any benefit from them. So fundamentally, they fail. Christian, what's the statistics on AI products?
Yeah, the latest one that we've been looking to is the MIT study. 95% of all AI initiatives failing at their attempt. But the interesting thing, if you read beyond the headline and just the main takeaway from that MIT abstract, is it's a common misconception across the C-suite that it's due to a lack of capability. We just need to wait until ChatGPT 6 and then it'll all be good, right? So that 95 will plummet. It's a misconception about what's currently there. And how these are failing is a misunderstanding of the technology, fundamentally, what it does and how it could be deployed and where best to use it. The 5% that are successful are taking a step back and understanding where in their product or where in their business process could AI play an important role. And it goes back to the bullet point too on the previous slide. It's fundamentally a new form of capability. You need to understand how and where it's appropriate. And this does go to one of the questions that we saw as well, the thoughts on founders and CTOs blindly jumping on the AI capabilities bandwagon. It's definitely happening, and it's happening at a surprising rate. And so part of what we teach at MDPM is how to be part of the 5% and get the 1 out of 20 success, rather than just blindly throwing another Gen AI hand wavy solution at the problems that you have, right? Doing this effectively takes some understanding.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's also like I'm not sure there's been like came out of the early 90s, right, in the industry working with the commercialization of the internet, and e-commerce was pretty hypey. The
Hmm.
dot-com
Hmm.
era, that was hypey for sure. But I'm not sure that I've seen anything since that is that hypey except AI, right? Like
Yeah.
you just see every senior executive everywhere is like, how do I address this for my business? And then I also laugh at the people that are like, how quickly can I retire? Because this seems like it's going to be
Yeah.
so significant that we're all a bit afraid. All right.
Yeah.
So what we want to do now is I'm going to walk Christian through what I call the end-to-end journey. So this is it's linear because we run a linear program in MDPM. We can't run it circular, but it does go in a circle. Trust me, it is iterative the way that we deal with it. But each of these are the different, what we call phases of the program. So that goes from first stage, early stage product is opportunity analysis, and then we go into interaction design, and then we do technical design, and then we really, figure out the market fit and the value proposition at the end. So what I'm going to do is speak to each of these and get Christian to articulate. So he's met with all of our faculty now. This is why we put a pause on the program, was for us to be able to breathe a new life into MDPM with regard to how AI is going to enable these products so that we can evolve into the AI product era. But I'm going to speak to the current state, and then Christian will tell us how it will evolve from here. All right. So opportunity analysis really comes down to what many people think about is defining the problem. So in the program, we talk about the problem space, what problem are we trying to solve? We talk about emerging technologies and really giving you a clear understanding of what emerging technologies are. And then we go into ethical product design. So Christian, in that space, how does AI change the way we do things?
Well, I mean, from working the way back in reverse, the ethical design of things, there are a new set of ethical challenges that are raised in the deployment of AI. The data that you use, how you use it, what you're building on top of. And this is at the heart of some of the curriculum that you see in MDPM. But also one of the cornerstone courses that we have is that emerging technologies course. And it's a fascinating course in that the entire curriculum, to do it right, kind of has to change every single year she delivers that course. The technologies that are emerging are changing rapidly. And so at one point it was LLMs and transformer technology, and we've moved beyond that now to the agentic style of things. And the emerging technologies is what's being built on the what's now kind of well-established generative AI techniques. And so this is kind of a course that is always in rapid refinement every single time that the program runs. And it's slated to run, 8 months down the road from this point. And so chances are it will change in what we currently envision it to be to reflect the emerging technologies of that moment when it's delivered. So I think that's the primary area where we sort of see if you're going to analyze the opportunities with what is just on the forefront of what's happening in industry. This is the course that sort of helps walk us through that.
And I want to visit Sam's question here, that he put in, or she, sorry, I don't know, Sam, but just call you Sam. So it's, what are your thoughts on the wave of founders, CTOs blindly
Right.
jumping on the AI capabilities bandwagon, eliminating expertise roles because AI can do it? How does the program address the need for valuing the human element, relying on experts to discern what truly addresses the user problem and pain points, and guiding said founders to see the light? I think, Sam, you actually answered part of Christian's question, because this really does get to the program does an excellent job of forcing students to stay in the problem space, meaning truly understanding the problem you're trying to solve and what those pain points are. And I think a lot of the times, just because a senior team has asked us to build something, some kind of product capability, right? Getting them to see the light, and the whole idea of even why we put ethical product design so early is that it's possible that they're going to solve this with AI, or even if it's feasible, we don't know yet. But even if, let's say we were to do that, the ethical implications can very quickly get a senior team to say, whoa, well, maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe we need to see the light here. So any thoughts on this question, Christian?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for elaborating. It is at the forefront of the program, essentially, so we can have those not how do we do it, but should we do it conversations right at the start, and to understand how things should unfold from that point. It is essential to do it upfront and have those conversations and just level set of what is possible and what is responsible in the creation of these products, right? I think part of Sam's question is to the broader point of replacing the jobs internal to the organizations as well. And the program does sort of reflect the shifting nature of how these roles are changing in the modern era. So all of the techniques that are taught in speaking with all of the different instructors, the software stacks that you use, and the way you create mind maps and so on, AI is playing a role all over the curriculum and the tooling that you use. And so, again, I mentioned before, AI is not going to take your job, but it will transform your job fundamentally. And we'll see that happen just in terms of what's being done, what's being taught across the different programs.
Excellent. Okay, so moving on to, and there are a few questions in the chat that I'm just going to preface before we move on. So I'm having a conversation with one of the attendees around, is the program designed for architects and technologists, or is it designed for people like with a political science major? The program was intentionally designed for both. And the reason is explained by this journey, right? So what we see is that people coming in with a political science degree, for example, oftentimes have a real great way of critically thinking about the political implications of something, or the why we shouldn't do it. So their capabilities would come into the program, and their opportunity is to learn the technology components of product. But that doesn't diminish the need for technical people to learn the political aspects of things. It's just they're going to learn that in phase one. And so the program is designed to take people from multiple parts of product, marketing, strategy, architecture, and really merge them all together and give everybody their own unique personal learning journey, to be able to get more of a holistic understanding. Even to the point that we've had students that have come in from religious studies to really understand how, faith is going to be transformed by technology. So we don't turn anyone away based on discipline. And that's really critical to highlight as we move forward. All right, so the next thing, after you go through the opportunity assessment phase or the analysis, we go over what we call the opportunity to product bridge, which is where we really start to design the product. And so we design the digital product, we evaluate the digital product, and we also think about how the product idea fits within the broader system. Because we talked about this earlier about probabilistic thinking and the whole idea of how these products aren't linear. And so those are kind of the areas that you would learn in this milestone. Christian, thoughts on how AI is going to change the curriculum in this space?
Yeah, I guess two quick things come to mind. One is the rapid prototyping of ideas to something not finished product, but interactive in a way to get a much better sense of what your finished product will look like, AI is really having a huge shift in what is possible right now with it. So we see that reflected in the program as well. But the second thought here is how AI is playing a role in the teaching of this core content. One very shining example is one of the courses focuses on how to run user studies with the product that you're creating, the prototypes that are there. This could be a very nerve-wracking process for some students. And so now there are hand-tailored agents created for the students to be able to practice this sort of interview usability design exercise again and again until they're comfortable and ready to go with the real users that sit down and use their prototype and have that conversation back and forth. So the training of the students, we're seeing AI be incorporated as well to very great effect.
Excellent. Well, and I'll add one thought here just because I'm pretty close to the systems thinking course.
Mhm.
And the one cool thing I've seen on the systems thinking side of things is building a context map is not easy. Trying to figure out how your product is going to connect to all other parts of the organization or even in the ecosystem. But this has been a really cool way to really design what I would call kind of headwinds and tailwinds, is that you can put kind of a systems problem into a generative engine and get that engine to make those connections. Like what would be a reinforcing loop if we balance this loop? And then to Christian's point, starting to use these techniques around simulated designs to really think about, oh, if we were to put in, let's call it an AI scribe in healthcare, right? What might be the systemic implications of that long term? And can we predict whether or not that would be a better choice than a different solution to trying to, tackle the documentation burden problem? Like these are just really cool ways where we get to designing AI enabled design, which I think is an exciting area to be further developed over time for sure. All right. Technical design is where we get into really what we call architecting the digital product. So we do an architecture evaluation, getting into the back end design. We also do security and some work around data and analytics techniques. So thoughts on this part of technical design?
Yeah, especially with AI-enabled products, a lot of it is now introducing the notion of data governance and the opportunity of the data that you do have, especially if the organization is multinational. Where does the data live? How is the data allowed to move? What data sources are you allowed to aggregate in which ways? And again, under the regulations and policies versus the opportunity of being able to do that versus the ethical implications of having and the security implications of having data stored in particular ways. All of this starts to play a role in the technical design of the product itself and the way that you architect what is collected, where it is stored, and how it is used as part of the product as well. So this is becoming a sort of a central role to those parts of the program.
Excellent. Okay, and then the last one is where we get into what we call value. So this is really where we talk about product market fit. We also do some work on what we call product business fit, like the change management elements, which one of the students was, or one of the audience members was asking about. Do we do proper change management around product? And ideally, my answer to that, we do change all the way. I think about it at the beginning and then
Yeah.
I actually enable the change at the end. But this is where we talk about the fit of the product to your internal processes. So what about this part in terms of AI?
Yeah, I would have to agree. It has to sort of come at the start, and we talk about it all through the way about how things might scale with respect to AI. If you have something that is extremely expensive on the individual level, and you're hoping to scale that to thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of users, we try to identify when your solution might be okay at the prototype level, but you will run into issues when you scale and you try to build out the product at that point. And so ideally, this is identified at the design phase, but identifying those bottlenecks sort of in that scaling final part is now becoming part of the program as well. And AI scales in weird ways. There are some ways that capability is only arrived at once you scale and you have a sufficient amount of data in order to provide the analytics and the insight. If I go back to the Netflix example, the only way they know how to write the script for their next B-roll movie is because they have the analytics of so many millions of customers, right? But in other ways, if you have, the latest large language models used for a chat agent for every one of the clients when they just want to do something simple, that's not going to scale because you're spending way too much resources at that particular application point, that touch point. So I think understanding what scales and how it scales is a part of this. And it's not always scaling up makes things harder. Sometimes it's scaling up enables and opens up new doors for you.
Mhm. Yeah, the whole concept of tailwinds, right? And
Yeah.
understanding what those tailwinds could be.
Mhm.
So my big takeaway from this webinar is we definitely need to do another one, Christian, because I think there's lots of
Yeah.
questions in the chat that well, try to get to a few here, but I think, a lot of questions even emerged from the conversation we've had today. So a couple things. One, I think is fairly, I'm not sure it's fair to ask you, but I liked the question. Steve asked around the idea of what questions can help one to probe to various aspects of AI systems available to users, like the Pelican riding a bicycle type questions. Do you have any other examples of that?
Yeah, there's a really good adage at the moment now where I ask everything about my own area of expertise and it like gets half of the stuff wrong, but it's wild if I ask it about something I know nothing about. It just seems so perfect and it gets everything right. And I mean, the message is, of course, it's not perfect in that other area. It's just that's not your area of expertise. And so to turn that into the concrete advice for Steve and anybody else on the call, find the areas where you are an expert, you know a lot about, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be related to your day-to-day profession, even. If you have an area of expertise that's just a side interest and you know a lot about it, run down some of the tasks that you think it is not capable of, but you could still frame in a textual basis, right? If you're really good at a particular musical instrument, ask it weird niche questions about that musical instrument and how it would play or how it would, whatever it might be. Find your niche where you are an expert, and then find the set of questions where you don't think it has the capability and kind of in a curriculum setting, have easy questions, medium, hard questions, and then see what's possible, right? I think the big message with it is you need to know what a right answer looks like, so that you're not just believing the tokens that are automatically predicted. But also you need to keep in mind that these things change every other day. It sort of seems, right? It's a very jagged form of intelligence where certain things it is extremely capable at, and other things like counting the number of R's in a strawberry, it is not able to do. It's a very weird landscape of what it is able to do and what it's not. And so being able to continually go back and say, hey, for this weird niche area, what have you got for me this month? Right. And again, you have to go across the different suite of things and test out the different models. I don't think you need to pay for all of the different services, but they're all kind of one-upping each other. And that jagged nature of the intelligence means that all of a sudden, an offering from one company might do really well at a particular area that you're interested in, while the others are still playing catch up. So it's worth going back to it in that way.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
And I have one last ask for you, Christian, if you don't mind to
Mhm.
jump into the Q&A. Rashid's asking about AI tools where you can get hand-zone
Mm.
experience. So I thought if you have any, could
Hands-on.
you pop them in? Yeah, pop them in the chat there. And I'm going to address Sam's question
Yeah.
and then do a close. So Sam asked the question around in the program whether or not you can focus on design or focus on a specific, like more of a project, like a product management track. The answer is no. The way that MDPM is built is really around the idea that we don't go deep into anything other than the product management role. So the product management role means you would have a UX UI design team. We give you enough to understand the UX team. We give you enough to understand the architecture team. We give you enough to understand the marketing team. But this program is designed for product managers or what we call product adjacent, meaning that we have marketers that come in that want to learn more about product. So you cannot pick a track, but I would say if you are interested in UX, UI design, some of our sister, universities around, there's some great programs in that specifically around design, if that's what you're interested in. But this program is definitely designed to be more of a generalist program. All right, with that in mind, let me just let you know all the other questions in there can be answered by this webinar. So We do have Christian, and my job is we do content webinars. So we talk about content related to, and then we've got Beth and Colin and Connor come in and do what we call program webinars. So they talk all about the program, its design, and they can answer all the other questions about this program and other programs. That is October 16th from 1 to 2. And so you can register for that webinar on the website as well. So quickly, Christian, thank you. We will come back once we've had a time to debrief with what's next on the content webinar front. I think we have lots more that we can unpack. Thanks to those people who've offered questions in the chat, and thanks to all of you for joining us for this webinar today. Until next time, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Bye all.